Hello, healthy people, and welcome back to the Organelle podcast. Today, we're conducting an introductory explanation into the role of nutrition in health excellence. This episode is a primer for the importance of good food and covers what most people get wrong about diets, a qualitative approach to food versus a quantitative one, how mindset factors into our eating habits, and the critical difference between nutrient intake and nutrient absorption. As always, I'm Xavier Greenhalgh, and joining me will be the Organelle digital health platform's leading practitioner, Lionel Godwin. So, without further ado, let's all take the next step on our health journeys. Hello again, my good friend.
Hey Xavier, how are you, buddy?
Oh, I'm fantastic, Lionel. Oh,
As
we're back for
always.
another good one today. We're continuing our Organelle Basics series. Last week we talked about pathology. This week we're right back in the thick of it with nutrition. Now, I know, Lionel, that you love this topic to death, but we are limited to 20 minutes. So I'm going to be guiding this through a really high level abstract conversation, just stuff that laymen would understand and could use to effect really awesome change really easily in their own lives.
So
So
that 20 minutes,
keep that in mind.
sorry to interrupt you, but if we're doing this for 20 minutes, does that mean we're having at least 10 or 12 of these podcasts on nutrition?
Eventually,
20 minutes is not
I'm
going to
sure
cut
by
it.
the time we reach,
20 minutes is not going to
I'm,
cut
sh-
it. Sorry, Xavier.
I'm,
You know how
I
much
think
I
by the
love
time we
nutrition.
reach, by the time we get to 200 episodes, we will have probably done 20 on nutrition
I
alone.
hope
So
so,
don't you
because
worry at all, Lionel.
it's my favorite topic in the world.
Beautiful. I'm going to lead you in with a bit of a difficult question then, Lionel. In as simple as possible terms, how do you define nutrition? Gotcha.
Yeah, you
He's
have,
done.
because how do I define nutrition? Nutrition, for me, the definition of nutrition is understanding what your body's requirements are and how to best meet them with nutrient dense foods as opposed to nutrient void foods.
Okay, okay.
Very simple. Very
Well,
simple.
I know you well, and you've lectured me enough on this, so I've got a decent idea of where this conversation is going to go. I'm going to split it into two parts. We're going to start with quantity, just the raw how much food someone eats and the type of foods. Then we're going to talk about quality, where we can get into the nitty gritty of what exactly someone should be eating. So, just to lead us off into it, Lionel, let's start with quantity. What does that really mean when it comes to nutrition?
So, generally, as a rule, people eat. They eat with their eyes, not with their stomach, for a start. So understanding that the stomach is virtually something that's that big in most people. So it's not a massive area that we need to fill. So if you can get in your mind that we're only trying to fill a space that big with food, then to monitor the quantity of our food is really, really, really important. Having established the quantity of food that you're going to eat, then in order the fact that we're only going to fill up a space this big, let's make sure that the quality of that food is at its quantitative best, if that makes sense. So that not only because we're not having a massive amount, the quality of that food has to be at its utmost. There can be no empty calories in the calories that we consume.
Do you think if our stomach is only this big,
Yep.
does the average person eat? Because that to me that looks like one meal,
Yep.
right? So are we meant to be filling our stomach every time we eat, or are we meant to be half filling it, or
It
what's
depends on
what's
the
what's most
activity. It
efficient
depends
here?
on the time between eating. There, there, there are so many different views on how people should
Hmm.
eat. Now, one of the things that I don't do is when I'm
Hmm.
talking to people, I never have a generic answer for people when it comes to eating. Everybody's eating requirements, nutritional requirements, habits, time, and commitment to eating is very, very, very different. So for me, it's more about understanding, okay, what does my body need? What are the primary uh, nutritional requirements of my body today? How do I best get them? And over what period of time? am I prepared to get these nutrients into my system? So that for me is the starting point. So I know that I'm an active person. I know that I expend a lot of energy both physically and mentally. Mentally, we burn up a lot of calories just using our mind. So for me, what does that look like? I know that I need to have at least three, sometimes four nutrient dense meals a day. Now, they vary in size. My first meal of the day, after I've trained in the morning, is generally my biggest meal. And that will consist of grains, it'll consist of fruits, it'll consist of fats, and it'll consist of really good fiber. My second meal of the day is I try and get as many nutrient dense calories into me as I can, but it's a smaller meal than the meal that I had at breakfast. Then my main meal at night time is generally only a plant based meal so that I can break this food down quickly and not have my digestive system working overtime once I've gone to bed at night time. Now that's what works for me. So, but I understand emphatically what my nutritional requirements are, and I'm making sure that I'm getting, we always hear the terms macros and micros. I don't focus on macros and micros per se, although inadvertently I do. I make sure I'm getting adequate protein. I make sure I'm getting adequate fat. I'm making sure I get adequate carbohydrates. But in what forms, it varies between meals. It really does vary in between each meal that I have every day. All I know is that there's consistency across all of my meals around fats, carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, minerals, and antioxidant rich foods.
Yeah, we're throwing around a lot of words there, though. I think it might do us justice to give some brief definition and context to things like macronutrients. Obviously, your big three: fats, carbs, proteins. Let's focus on those just briefly, Lionel. Could you tell us like what are those and why are they important?
Okay, protein, obviously the building blocks of all of our muscle, all of our body effectively, is built upon protein. Carbohydrates are great sources of fiber, and this fibrous foods and the carbohydrates that we eat is generally turned into glucose in the body. And then fats, which is our most efficient form of energy in the body. It's also the thing that allows our cells to have flexibility. It allows for our cell membranes to be able to receive information and get rid of information. It allows our joints to have viscosity. So really important fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. Proteins also, really important substances in our hormonal balance within the body. So they all play really significant and vital roles within the body.
It's a really interesting definition you've given there, because me as a layman who's just inspired by Instagram fitness reels, essentially, uh, the general impression I had was that carbohydrates were the main source of energy, but you've defined them as the main source of fiber, and then fats as our most efficient source of energy.
Certainly the most
Could you
efficient
square
fat.
the circle?
So
Hmm?
what happens is when we eat our carbohydrates, as the body breaks them down and they get ingested into the bloodstream and go through the liver then releases them as glucose, which is, the main source of energy for the body. So we need those. The issue with fat, and the reason that I like fat, and particularly good fats, is that they are the most efficient source of energy in the body. And if we're depleted of carbohydrates, it's the fat that our body breaks down that becomes our source of energy. Um, you
I
know,
see. Well, I think you've given something there. Okay, so that's macros defined for those who are listening. Let's move to micros. Obviously, whereas there's three macros, there's a buttload of micros, and we can't list them all. But what are the big, most important micronutrients that we should
So
focus on?
micronutrients are the vitamins and the minerals we get from a lot of our plant-based food and a lot of our animal foods as well. We do get a lot of minerals and stuff from our animal products, but it's essentially the vitamins and minerals that we get and the fiber that we get. The fiber plays a really important part in our bodies. The rate at which food transits through our digestive system, for instance, is all dictated by fiber. Insoluble fiber gets into our colon and our bowel and helps make short chain fatty acids. And these short chain fatty acids are what the brain uses for energy and that our cells use for energy as well. The fiber also, at different parts and different times in our bodies is drawing toxins and crap out of our bodies as well. And so they play a really important part in our overall health and well-being.
Yeah, just off of that, I can expect the listeners can be excited for the upcoming fiber episode in the future.
Yeah, and we'll talk
But
much more
to
about it.
bring all
Soluble
that
and
together,
insoluble fiber. Soluble and insoluble fiber, we need to understand, and we need to allow our listeners to understand the important roles of soluble and insoluble fiber within our digestive system and the roles that it plays within the body. That's a podcast for another day, but it is an interesting one.
good to keep in the back of the head. Okay, so we've got this nice little system here, this micronutrient system that we're probably going to throw away because you've said that you don't like to focus on those things. What do you like to focus on instead of those, if those are the building blocks?
So I like to focus on balance. So I like to make sure
Mm.
that I'm getting the right balance, the right amount of grains, the right amount of protein, the right amount of fats, and the right amounts of vitamins and minerals. So, and I do that through making sure that there are balance in my meals, so that there is adequate fat, there is adequate fiber, there is adequate protein, um, and that there is a broad cross section of foods to provide that balance. I very much focus for myself on colors. Every meal that I have has a minimum of 8 colors. Sometimes I get up to 12 colors. For me, that's the easiest way for me to see if a meal is balanced. If I've got a broad cross section of colors there, I know those colors are representing different um, vitamins and different minerals and different substances in the body. So as long as I'm getting those minimum of 8 colors, I know I'm covering off on virtually all of my nutritional needs.
And I take it you're not just talking about rainbow layer cakes here.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about nutrient dense calories as opposed to empty calories. So expand. What's a nutrient dense calorie? A nutrient dense
Mm.
calorie is something that comes from all of the plant-based foods, the beans, the legumes, the nuts and seeds, the grains, the fruits, and some animal proteins. Certainly the fish. I don't eat a lot of red meat and stuff, but certainly I eat a lot of fish and stuff. So I'm getting all of those good nutrient-dense calories there. What I never eat and never will eat is empty calories. So empty calories for me are highly refined foods, high sugar foods, high processed foods, or foods that come in a package. They generally, for me, by interpretation, are empty calories. So I don't like to eat empty calories. I have a calorific intake of around 2,200 calories to 2,800 calories on any given day. It can vary, but they are always nutrient dense calories. I have no empty calories in my diet at all. I just don't see the need to put something in my mouth that is not going to provide me and or my body some form of nutritional benefit.
Yeah, and just to kind of, I'll try and give my perspective for the viewer because it's more bro sciencey and simple minded. But to my understanding, every type of food has macros, pretty much equivalently, but not everything has micros. And
No,
that you can have things that are identical in a macro sense, or 33 grams of protein, 10 grams of carbs, 10 grams of fat, exact same, but one might have like basically hundreds of times more micronutrients involved in it, and one might have absolutely none. And the difference usually or typically is going to be that the one with no micronutrients is going to be a lot more processed. In that something to do with the process of processing, ironically, seems to strip these foods of those vital micronutrients. Why does that happen? Why
so
does like microwaving things make them less good?
because in a lot of cases, heat destroys micronutrients. That's the first thing. The other thing is the way that they've been processed, the way that they've been transported, the way that they've been stored, the soil that they've grown in. Sometimes we have really poor soil conditions in Australia on a lot of farms, and they're working on that now. They do a lot more regeneration and turning stuff back into the soils to help improve the nutrient density or certainly the mineral density of soils. But a lot of our food is grown in really poor conditions, so there's not a lot of quality already in the foods that we're eating. Then you add the picking and how that stresses certain foods, the packaging, which stresses it again, the heat that's applied to it at times, which destroys nutrients, and then there's the transport and the shelf life of particular foods. And if we are creating great conditions for all of these along the way, then these things will naturally decline in terms of their nutritional value.
I see. So just based on the amount of like things that we do to affect the food after it's grown naturally, just the more things that you do to it, the worse it seems to become. Which is why, a beautiful grass-fed steak cooked at home, put between two freshly baked rye bread buns or whatever it's going to be, infinitely better for you than a Big Mac, for example, even if the two are identical macronutrient wise.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Because the grass fed is less likely to have any of the contaminants that the Macca's food has. And again, I'm not disrespecting Macca's. There's a place for them. Everybody loves them. I'm not going to be held down by all the Macca's lovers out there. But the reality is, Macca's use the cheapest cuts of meat. They're full of pesticides, fungicides, herbicides, and all of the other additives that go into these generally grain fed. Uh, Products that have been turned, grain fed animals that have been turned into the products that Macca sells. Whereas a grass fed steak cooked at home, cooked at lower temperature, not overcooked, so that we're turning not only when we overcook it are we making the fibers much more tighter, which means they take longer to break down and be ingested into our systems. So to a large part they go through undigested. We're also destroying a lot of the nutritional value in them by overheating them and cooking them for too long, and turning a lot of the meats in particular into really carcinogenic forms of themselves. The more we cook them, the longer they take to break down within our system. So the longer we've got this rotting, decaying flesh sitting in our digestive system, which is never a good thing for our digestive systems. We want food to be able to transit through much more rapidly, but more importantly, be broken down so that we're actually absorbing the nutrients that are in there. And when you've cooked that nice grass-fed steak at home, you've only seared it on both sides, and you've still got it rare, so that you're getting all of the nutritional value from that macro meal.
Beautiful. So the difference there being, in layman's terms again for me, is that the micronutrients are actually the things that your body uses to regulate health a lot more than the macronutrients. You can stay alive on macronutrients, but you're not going to thrive on them. You really, really need those
You
micros.
need the balance of both. You need the balance of both. We
Yeah.
definitely need the macros just for survival. We also need the micros. Think of the micros. They're doing the nuance roles. They're doing all the little, the stuff that goes unrewarded. You, you don't get the big muscles from uh, the spinach. You get that from the steak. But the spinach, the fiber in the spinach, the K1 in the spinach is doing all of this other really good, powerful stuff. There's very strong antioxidants. They're doing all of these other things to allow the cells to function the way we want the cells to function.
Okay. So I want to take us on a little bit of a different path here. You've told me previously about some interesting perspective that you have on this that I want the audience to learn about. And that's your whole philosophy around it's not about what you take in, it's not about your nutritional intake, it's about what you absorb, your nutritional absorption. What's
Yes.
that about, Lionel? Walk us through that.
So, you know, it's one thing to eat. It's another thing to understand what you're eating and whether your body is able to absorb what you're eating. We live in a world, Xavier, we have so many contaminants around us. We have so many foreign substances that come into our body that really disrupt the digestive system. They deplete the body of digestive enzymes. They really disrupt the microbiota, so the bacteria within our digestive system that helps to break down food and plays a really important part in so many aspects of what happens within the body. And unfortunately, when people are really stressed or anxious, their digestive system is impacted. If people have an autoimmune condition, their digestive system is impacted. If people have a poor imbalance in their gut health, their digestive system is impacted. When the digestive system is impacted, and I've talked about this in other podcasts. You asked me, I think, in a previous podcast about why I don't like protein powders. Protein powders are full of emulsifiers and preservatives and additives, and the digestive system is thrown into disarray when we've got to deal with all of these additives and emulsifiers and fillers. You know, the digestive system recognizes that these things have no nutritional value. So they try and get rid of them. But while they're trying to get rid of them, the good foods that we're eating with those are passing through these really important early stages of digestion in the stomach and in the small intestine and going through largely undigested. So we're not absorbing all of those really good qualities of nutrients that are in these foods. So this is the difference between what we're eating and what we're absorbing. So we need to create conditions, one, where we understand implicitly what our body is able to absorb, and we can do that through a blood test. It's a very good blood test that we can do. Um, we also need to make sure that what we are eating, we are absorbing. And again, we can measure that through our blood works again to see whether we are, getting all of the vitamins, all of the minerals, what our proteins levels are, and the like, what our fat levels are. We can do all this through pathology. And anything that enables us to absorb better quality nutrients will have an immediate impact on our overall health and well-being.
Okay. Well, I think we could go on with this for another 5 hours if we wanted to until we drop from exhaustion.
We can
But
if you
that's
let
all
me.
we have time for today. No, no, we're gonna save it. It'll be worth it when it comes out in 20 different
Excellent.
episodes, Lionel. Trust
Excellent.
me. Much more digestible. But
Good. Pardon the pun.
anyhow, if you guys have been enthralled or intrigued by anything you've heard here today, or would like to find out more about me and Lionel and the business that is Organelle, you can go to organelle.com.au. That's organelle.com.au. Thank you for your attention and your beautiful time. Thank you, Lionel, for coming here and doing this with me again. I can't wait for the next one.
Always a pleasure, Xavier. Good to see you, and we'll talk again soon.